Her stepson read her forged will out loud while she lay drugged in a hospital bed. Helen Graves, 68, widow and former paralegal, didn't flinch. Jason, her late husband's brilliant boy, thought she couldn't hear. By the time he finished the last lie, her real will was already in motion. She'd once let him manage the paperwork, now she was the paperwork. And when he came for her legacy, the IRS would be waiting at the door. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The morphine came in waves, soft and heavy, like warm syrup pouring through my spine. Each breath dragged across my ribs like fabric against sunburned skin. The fourth beeped low in the corner, steady as a metronome. I couldn't move much, couldn't speak, not in full words. But I heard everything. Jason sat in the corner chair beside my hospital bed, legs crossed, ankle resting just a little too confidently on his knee. His voice was smooth, unnaturally so. That affected calm he always used when pretending to be the man of the family. He cleared his throat. Just wanted to walk you through a few things, Helen. You know, since we're all trying to be prepared. My eyelids fluttered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He pulled out a folder from his leather messenger bag. Not the soft, worn kind. A brand new, boardroom sleek number with a silver clasp. I had the lawyer send over the final version, he said. Thought I'd read it out loud just to reassure you. That wasn't my folder, and that sure as hell wasn't my lawyer. He flipped a page and began. In the event of my incapacitation or death, I, Helen Graves, being of sound mind, do hereby assign medical power of attorney to Jason Edward Graves. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I kept my breathing shallow. My fingers twitched under the blanket, the only betrayal I allowed. Jason glanced at me, smiled like a pallbearer in training, and continued. And I designate all remaining assets, including property, vehicles, and financial accounts, to be placed into the Graves Family Trust, under the stewardship of Jason Edward Graves, my devoted stepson and sole trustee. I wanted to scream, or sit up, or claw the words out of the air, but I did none of that. I blinked, slow and deliberate, and let him keep talking. That document wasn't just false, it was theft, printed on ivory paper. Jason folded the sheets carefully, like a man who believed every fake line he'd just read. Don't worry, he murmured. We'll make all the right decisions, just like Carl would have wanted. Carl, my husband, dead 3 months and buried with a trust in Jason he never should have had. Carl believed in systems, order, people doing the right thing when given clear instructions. Jason believed in loopholes. Carl loved him blindly, called him brilliant with money. I called him slippery. But I never pushed. I didn't want to seem petty. I was the second wife, after all. Step was always the first word people thought before son, and now I was paying for that silence in morphine and betrayal. Jason rose from the chair and gently pressed his palm to mine. A false tenderness, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. You just rest, okay? He said. I've got it from here. He didn't know I was memorizing every word. He didn't know I'd drafted my real will with Carl a year before the stroke, or that I'd kept a hard copy in a sealed envelope marked Helen's Eyes Only, tucked inside the back lining of my hospital tote. He didn't know I'd had Dana Lynn, my personal estate attorney, review the whole thing again after Carl's death, and keep a copy under legal seal. He didn't know anything that mattered. Later that night, long after the nurses changed shifts and Jason had fallen asleep on the recliner with a smug snore, I reached with trembling fingers into the tote bag beside my bed. The zipper was stiff. My pulse thudded behind my ears. I slid the envelope into my hospital gown and then, after a moment, tucked it beneath the folded hem of my blanket where the nurse always laid fresh towels. In plain sight, but not really. Jason muttered in his sleep and shifted. I froze. Then I exhaled and closed my eyes. The forged will may have been spoken into the air, but mine had just entered the next move, and I was still in the game. The morning after Jason read me my so-called will, the nurse with the soft drawl and orchid print scrubs brought me ice chips and a knowing look. Her name was Maureen, and she'd been on the night shift since the day I was admitted. The kind of woman who noticed small things, like when someone's hands shook less than their voice. "Pain level today, Ms. Graves?" she asked, eyeing the IV monitor. 6, I whispered. "Maybe 5. Morphine's generous." She smiled, but her eyes stayed sharp, watching. When she turned to fluff the pillow behind my shoulder, I slid the sealed envelope across the tray with fingers still tender from surgery. Cream cardstock. My handwriting on the front, H. Graves, Private. Maureen blinked once, then looked down at the envelope. She didn't touch it. "Ms. Graves, I'm not supposed to—" "It's a copy," I said softly. "Not drugs, not instructions, just a copy. But I need someone I trust to make it." Quietly. She hesitated. "Nurses see everything, especially lies in lace." But what I gave her wasn't desperation. It was quiet command, the kind of calm that comes from someone who's already counted how far they'll go. "You want a full duplicate?" I nodded. "And if anyone asks, you brought me a crossword puzzle?" She slipped the envelope into the deep pocket of her scrub top and walked out like she hadn't just carried the weight of my entire estate. While she was gone, I opened my phone and deleted every email in my sent folder. Jason had checked it before. I knew the rhythm of his paranoia, the way he'd scroll through my apps pretending to tidy up, swiping with one hand while sipping my untouched ginger ale with the other. I opened a blank text window. The contact was saved as Dr. Lynn, dentist. If Jason saw it, he wouldn't look twice. I typed, "Tooth pain subsiding. Wondering if I can see you privately next week. X-rays in tote bag." A moment later, Dana replied, "Available. I'll bring the lead." Lead, legal documents. She always had a code. It was her way of saying, "I'm in. I believe you." I deleted the thread and powered down the phone. 10 minutes later, Maureen returned. She gave me a nod, not a word, and placed a clipboard on my tray with a crossword puzzle on top. Beneath it, the copy. My original will was safe. The paper trail had begun. Later that day, Jason returned, all charm and cinnamon-colored flattery, a bouquet of calla lilies and a box of pastries from my favorite bakery in Hyde Park, though he'd never remembered the name until Carl's funeral. He kissed my cheek without asking and set the bag of scones on the windowsill like a staged photo. "You're looking brighter," he said, pulling up the chair. "Got a few calls this morning. People asking about the lake cabin. Just interest. Nothing I've responded to?" I kept my eyes half-lidded, nodding slowly. Maybe next week I'll bring you that milkshake you love from the lake diner," he added, fingers already moving across my phone screen. I'd left it unlocked deliberately. He scrolled, checked texts, browsed emails, found nothing. Of course he didn't. I'd switched to paper for everything that mattered now. Notes in a spiral-bound pad I'd labeled Dream Journal with purple marker. If he ever opened it, he'd find recipes and riddles. But buried beneath that, in code, every transaction Carl made in the last year of his life. And my side of the estate, clean, controlled, untouched. Jason grinned as he handed the phone back. "You really do need a password, Helen." "Too much effort," I whispered. "Trust's easier." He laughed like I'd made a joke. That night, Maureen returned with a Post-it stuck inside my crossword book. 5 words, Dana's handwriting. "Meet me, privately, bring nothing digital." The game had moved into the open, quietly but fully alive. 1 year before Carl's heart gave out on a sleepy Wednesday morning, we sat in Dana Lynn's office while a storm rolled in behind the frosted glass windows. Carl wore a pressed Oxford shirt like he always did for important business. I wore a knit cardigan, deep burgundy, the color I always chose when I wanted to feel like the most reasonable person in the room. Carl believed in clean lines and tighter bonds, especially with Jason. "Let's just keep it simple," he told Dana. "Mutual wills, everything shared, everything passed down, and Jason gets the lake cabin, obviously." I said nothing, not then. Dana looked at me, then at Carl. "You're sure?" "Absolutely," he smiled. "He's good with money." I turned slowly toward Dana, lifting my teacup. I'd like a separate version. Private, notarized, identical terms, for now. Carl laughed, the kind that softened years. Helen, you really don't trust my son? I trust paper more, I replied. Carl thought it was a joke. Dana did not. After Carl's passing, I updated my version within the month. Quietly. I altered the distribution, adjusted the trust, and removed Jason as a successor trustee altogether. Dana held the updated copy. I kept another in my personal lockbox at the bank on South Lamar, filed between an old deed and a photograph of me as a girl, smiling in front of a plum tree. That version had teeth. Now, seated in the sterile hospital cafeteria, I handed that version, my version, across the table to Dana, who wore a navy blazer and calm like it was battle armor. Her fingers skimmed the seal and paused. "You're sure he doesn't know this exists?" she asked. "Jason doesn't know anything that wasn't handed to him with applause." Dana peeled back the flap and unfolded the paper slowly. Legal-grade linen, my signature in black ink, a notary stamp embossed so clean you could trace it with your eyes closed. She opened her folder and pulled out another document, Jason's version, the forgery. "Let's see what he gave us," she said. I leaned in, and together we scanned the lie. It was impressive, precise formatting, familiar fonts, but there were cracks. "Page 4, Dana murmured. "Look at the witness." I followed her finger. "Rita Summers, that's Carl's former nurse. She died 8 months ago, I confirmed it yesterday." She flipped another page. "And here, your signatures in gel ink, on a document supposedly signed in 2022. My breath tightened, but not from fear. "He read it aloud to me," I said. "Right after my morphine drip. Thought I was a body on a countdown." Dana leaned back, temple pinched between her fingers. He didn't even try to hide the ambition. No power of attorney disclaimer, no medical release. Because he thought he'd won. We sat in silence for a beat, the hum of vending machines around us like a distant radio dial. Someone in scrubs passed by, laughing into a phone. I envied the simplicity of that sound. Dana finally spoke. "We have what we need, but we don't strike yet." "Why not?" "Because if we expose him now, he scrambles, lawyers up, shifts assets, sells off anything that could tie back to fraud." I folded my hands in my lap. "So we wait." She nodded once. "We wait. We go quiet, and we let him bury himself." The way she said it, not vindictive, not cruel, but inevitable. It felt like a switch flipping. Outside the cafeteria window, a janitor rolled a cart past, dragging a mop that left a perfect wet trail behind him. Jason was doing the same, leaving evidence, leaving proof. For 2 weeks, I became the picture of graceful decline, pale skin, slow nods, eyes half-lidded like the morphine still owned me. I let the nurses lift my arms like I was porcelain, let Jason hover, clipboard in hand, all fake concern and too many questions about long-term care arrangements. He thought I was folding, but I was setting the table. Maureen, the orchid-scrubbed nurse with a conscience like steel, handed me a slip of paper one afternoon while changing my IV bag. On it, a single name, Rhonda Teller, Wellswood Trust, my financial advisor, trusted, private. Retired once, then came back because retirement was boring. I had her number memorized. I never kept it in my phone. That evening, during the soft shift between nurse changes, I whispered the hospital phone into my palm. "It's Helen," I said. "Helen who?" Rhonda asked. "Smart woman. Your stubborn redhead from Hyde Park, the one with the lake cabin and no tolerance for bullshit." She laughed once. "Well, hell, thought you were dead." "Not yet. I need you to freeze everything. Quietly." A pause. Then, "You want the house flagged too?" "Everything with my name on it." "I'm on it. You just play dead a little longer." Dana filed the court motion the next morning, an estate activity freeze, flagged as high-risk beneficiary exploitation. It was sealed. No alert would reach Jason unless he tried to move something, which, of course, he did. I overheard it on a Wednesday while pretending to doze. Jason stood just outside my room, talking too loud on his Bluetooth earpiece like he wanted the nurses to hear his confidence. "She won't even notice. We'll have that cabin listed before the weekend," he said. "She's not going to live long enough to sign off." Dana's motion had already gone through. The title couldn't transfer. The block would kick in once the realtor filed escrow, but Jason thought he'd won. That Friday, he brought in another stack of papers and a silver pen, smiling like he'd just walked out of a trust seminar. "Hey, Helen," he cooed. "Just a few forms to simplify things in case you ever do want to rest permanently." He slid a POA across the tray table, his version, pre-filled, stapled tight. "This just helps us act on your behalf if you're not, all here." I nodded slowly. "Should I sign now?" "You're sharp today," he said with that waxy grin. "But yeah, let's just get it done." I took the pen in trembling fingers and signed it, but not with my legal signature. I wrote it the way I did when I was 16, wide loops, overdramatic flourishes. I hadn't signed like that in 50 years. The document was now invalid. And proof of manipulation. Jason kissed the top of my head like I was already buried. 3 days later, during another nurse visit, he forgot the camera on the teddy bear. Maureen was replacing the sheets when Jason leaned over and muttered, "She can't even read her own name. Might as well be gone already." The mic caught everything. I sent the file to Dana with a timestamp and a single message. "He's writing his own obituary." She responded within minutes. "Good. Keep going. We've almost got the lock." Then came the twist. A manila envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Inside, a printed mortgage statement dated last week. It had my name on it. The buyer. Address. A suburban development I'd never heard of. 40 miles outside Austin. Jason had bought a house. In my name. And now, I owned a debt I never signed for. He thought he'd gotten away with it. That's what made him sloppy. The mortgage statement listed the property at $409,000, a weathered 2-story fixer-upper in an up-and-coming neighborhood on the eastern fringe of Austin. Hardwood bones, investment potential, the kind of real estate listing Jason salivated over like a wolf dressed in designer loafers. He'd purchased it in my name. Dana traced the transaction within 2 hours. She cross-referenced the mortgage filings against the LLC listed on the purchase docs. Buried in the paperwork was a holding company called Emerald Bridge Group LLC. Jason was listed as managing member. He hadn't even used a proxy name, just his own, bald-faced and confident. I stared at the scanned file from my hospital bed, the edges of the document sharp enough to slice. "So," I murmured, voice even, "he's planning to flip it." Dana nodded. "He thinks you'll be gone before the escrow closes. The plan is to renovate using your credit, sell in 6 months, and pocket the margin." "Then let's let him think he's won." Her eyes narrowed. "You sure?" I didn't blink. "Draft the gift letter." 3 days later, Dana returned with the document. 1 page, simple language. "I, Helen Graves, in full mental and legal capacity, hereby transfer the property located at address to Jason Edward Graves as a gift and acknowledgement of his service and loyalty." Jason needed to believe he was getting a clean handoff. We'd make it look like I'd finally relented, like the aging widow had surrendered her empire to the eager heir. I had the nurse slide the tray table close. Jason arrived shortly after, cheeks flushed from a run or a sale or another lie. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing the form. "My thank you," I said softly. "You've been doing so much. I want to give you the house." He blinked. You want to give it to me?" I nodded. "While I'm still here, I'd like to see you thrive." He looked like a boy who'd just been handed the keys to a candy shop no one was watching. He signed without reading the fine print, not realizing that by accepting the gift, he was legally acknowledging he had acted on my behalf, and with my permission, to purchase a house under my name. The pen scratched softly against the paper. My breath stayed steady. I signed too, the way I always had. Legally, controlled, no loops. Dana witnessed the signature, notarized it the same day. Then we sent it straight to my accountant, who flagged it for IRS review. The gift was over the $17,000 annual tax exclusion limit. That meant Jason was now responsible for paying the gift tax on a $400,000 asset. And when the IRS investigated where the funds came from, they'd land squarely on Emerald Bridge Group LLC, which meant they'd land squarely on Jason. The confirmation arrived in a letter marked Confidential, U.S. Treasury Department. The IRS had opened a case, fraud suspicion, asset misreporting, falsified power of attorney. Jason didn't even know yet, but Dana and I did. "I've got a contact in the IRS fraud division," she said, her voice clipped but thrilled. "They've frozen Emerald Bridge Group's accounts pending investigation." I pressed the envelope between my fingers and smiled without showing teeth. "He thought the house was a trophy," I said. "No," Dana replied. "It's a time bomb." I looked out the hospital window, where fall had finally cracked into Austin, a slice of gold sun through brittle red leaves. We were no longer playing defense. We were building the pyre, and Jason had just handed me the match. The envelope arrived in the evening, hand-delivered by a hospital administrator with a twitch in her jaw and too much pink in her cheeks. "Ms. Graves," she said, avoiding my eyes, "we've received a petition from your stepson. He's filed for full medical proxy." I blinked once, calmly. "Claiming what exactly?" I asked. She swallowed. "Cognitive decline. He's citing confusion, erratic decision-making. He's asked for immediate guardianship authority." Dana was already 10 steps ahead. We had anticipated this, Jason trying to lock me away with the click of a judge's pen. It was bold, desperate. A classic move from someone watching the floor open beneath his feet. The hospital's ethics board hesitated, of course. They're trained to err on the side of protection, and Jason had used all the right buzzwords: fragile, compromised, can't read, can't sign. They granted him temporary proxy rights pending hearing. A week. 7 days of potential sabotage. 7 days to do damage if we hadn't been ready. But we were. Dana had a sealed psych evaluation from Dr. Ellis, a top cognitive specialist in Travis County. I had taken it privately 3 weeks ago. My idea. I passed every test. Memory recall, abstract reasoning, pattern recognition. I even corrected his spelling. Error on the consent form. Jason didn't know that. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning. The courthouse was quiet, not yet buzzed with divorcees and traffic violations. Just us, a judge with a neutral stare, and the beige scent of bureaucracy. Jason arrived in a navy suit that didn't quite fit, like he'd borrowed someone else's dignity. His lawyer, a balding man named Kramer, was all puffed chest and manufactured outrage. "My client is deeply concerned," Kramer began, "that Mrs. Graves is no longer mentally capable of managing her care, finances, or decisions." He gestured toward me as if I were a piece of broken furniture. "According to whom?" Dana asked. Jason cleared his throat. "She didn't recognize me last week, called me by her late husband's name, couldn't remember what day it was." I looked him dead in the eye. "You mean the day you tried to get me to sign over the cabin again?" He shifted, blinked. Dana stood and submitted the evaluation from Dr. Ellis. "Testimony and documentation, Your Honor, confirming full cognitive functionality. Dated and notarized prior to the petition. My client not only remembers what day it is, she remembers the last 4 digits of Jason's social security number." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Prove it," he said, more curious than skeptical. I said them out loud, one by one. Jason turned red. Then Dana added, "Also, we have surveillance footage and recorded audio, all of it demonstrating Jason's manipulation while she was under morphine post-surgery. Would Your Honor like to hear Jason say, and I quote, 'She can't even read anymore'?" Jason's lawyer turned ghost white. "No need," the judge said flatly. "Let's move to medication claims." Jason scrambled. I have records showing she's been disoriented. I helped coordinate all of her prescriptions." "Which ones?" the judge interrupted. "Name one." Jason paused, blinked. Hydrocodone? I smiled. I'm allergic to hydrocodone. The room stilled. Dana closed her folder gently. No further questions. The judge took one breath and then ruled. Petition denied. Temporary proxy revoked. Mr. Graves, you are barred from accessing medical records or making health-related decisions for Mrs. Graves in any capacity. The gavel cracked down like a shot. Jason stood, colorless. He turned to me, face twisted, and hissed, "She's ruining everything." I tilted my head, calm as a cloud. "No, Jason," I said softly, "I'm rewriting it." And we were only halfway through the book. There was a teddy bear on the shelf beside my hospital bed, small, cream-colored, and forgettable. It had arrived with a gift tag that read, "Get well soon. Love from the team at your HOA." I didn't know a soul from the board. Jason probably dropped it off to look thoughtful. I gave it a purpose. Maureen helped me open a seam in its back the night before his next visit. She was quiet as a whisper, her hands working quickly beneath the dim light of the bedside lamp. We slipped in a micro-recorder, activated by voice, set to run silent, tucked it beneath the stuffing and stitched the seam with white thread, just slightly uneven so it still looked lovingly cheap. "You're sure this is legal?" she whispered. "Only if he's stupid enough to talk," I said, "and he always is." Jason arrived the next morning with that fake, sunny clatter of a man who wanted to be seen as caring, a coffee in each hand, a granola bar stuffed in his jacket pocket. Like that made him a caregiver instead of a predator in pressed chinos. "Hey, sunshine," he said too loudly. "You're looking more alive than yesterday. That's a win." I gave a weak smile. Let him believe I was fading again. He moved toward the window, opened the blinds an inch, then pulled out his phone. "You don't mind if I hop on a quick call, do you?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "Just broker stuff." He hit speakerphone. "Yo, Mitch, it's go time. The bond accounts?" "Yeah. We're gonna move half to the trust under her name, the rest to Emerald Bridge. She doesn't know the difference between a bond and a breadstick." I didn't blink. Yeah, she's basically brain dead. Just lays there. The doctors practically got her embalmed." He laughed. I didn't. "Exactly. I get full withdrawal rights under the POA. Hell, she signed it." The bear kept listening. He talked for another 5 minutes. Numbers, transfers, slipped in admissions. No filter. He was so used to winning in silence that he'd forgotten silence could have ears. When he left, I waited exactly 3 minutes, then pressed the tiny switch through the teddy bear's side, clicked stop, and rang Maureen. She passed the device to Dana through the staff entrance that afternoon, tucked in a box of bakery cookies with a red ribbon tied around it. Dana texted me a few hours later. "Got it. Audio's clean. Time-stamped. Voice print match confirmed by private analyst. It's usable." I exhaled for the first time that day. We didn't need to guess anymore. We had his voice admitting fraud, manipulation, and exploitation. We had proof he'd used the fake POA to access accounts that were never his. We had his plan, in his words. Dana bundled the audio with the paper trail, wire transfers, bond withdrawals, the fake house purchase, and submitted the package to the fraud unit we'd been quietly feeding for weeks. The next morning, Jason came in red-faced, the thin thread of charm unraveling from the edges. "They froze your brokerage," he snapped. I tilted my head ever so slightly. "Did they?" "Don't play dumb, Helen. The accounts, you changed access. They locked me out. I had to call twice just to—" "You're not on the paperwork," I said simply. He blinked. "Not anymore." He paced, clenched his fists, looked like he might throw the coffee he'd brought in, but that would have made too much noise. Too much reality. His voice cracked. This is illegal." I smiled gently. "So report it," I said. "I'd love to see you explain your signature on my bonds." Jason stared at me, shaking, and for the first time, he didn't have anything to say. The freeze order came down at 9:17 a.m. on a Monday, delivered by a clerk in patent leather heels and a badge clipped to her lapel. The paper was stamped, sealed, and deadly. Dana had filed it 3 days earlier, an emergency injunction to lock down every joint account, trust, and asset that bore my name, Carl's name, or any signature Jason had faked. The judge signed off before breakfast. Jason didn't see it coming. He had just locked in a buyer for the East Austin property, the one he flipped with my money and his lies. The buyer backed out the minute the injunction hit. Their lawyer smelled blood and lawsuits. At 10:03 a.m., Jason stormed into my hospital room like a wolf that had just walked into a trap disguised as a garden. "You froze everything?" he barked, hands shaking at his sides. "You can't do that. That's my LLC, Helen. I worked for that equity." I tilted my head on the pillow, voice calm. "So you were working. Interesting. The trust says you were serving." His lips twitched. "You don't understand what you've done. That house was under contract. We were days away from a payday." "I know." He blinked. "You knew?" I nodded once. "And so did the IRS. They've already flagged the funds for audit." Jason stared at me like I had just grown claws. "This is betrayal," he hissed. "No," I said softer. "This is accountability." He took one step closer. "You're not well. You're being coached. Dana's twisting everything." I didn't flinch. "Read the real will," I whispered, carefully. He froze, like a man realizing the map he followed led off a cliff. Then he spun and left, the door swinging half-closed behind him. By nightfall, Dana had delivered a new packet of joy directly to his front porch. Certified delivery, signature required. Inside, notice of a pending criminal inquiry, wire fraud, elder exploitation, forgery, and one count of real estate misrepresentation with intent to defraud a financial institution. Jason didn't sign for it. His girlfriend did. By Tuesday, we had footage of him through a neighbor's Ring camera, in his garage, shoving documents into a black trash bag and feeding them one by one into a portable shredder. Fast, frantic, shirt half untucked, eyes wild. But it was too late. The investigators already had copies, bank records, audio logs, emails Dana had subpoenaed from his side LLC. He was slicing confetti, not erasing evidence. And then came the final push, the fake notary. Her name was Veronica Chase, a mobile notary Jason had hired off a Facebook legal services group. He paid her $200 cash to witness documents I'd never seen. Dana subpoenaed her, and Veronica cracked. Under pressure, she admitted to notarizing multiple estate documents without me present, said Jason told her I was ill but lucid, and insisted I couldn't be disturbed. He signed everything in front of her and even offered her a mimosa afterward. "I didn't know she wasn't consenting," Veronica said. "I swear I thought she was in on it." Dana recorded the statement, had it transcribed, submitted it to the DA. Jason didn't know yet, but he would. And the next time a knock came to his door, it wouldn't be a delivery. It would be a subpoena, with his name at the top. The courthouse smelled of old varnish and dry paper, the kind of place where lives were signed away without ceremony. My wheelchair tires whispered across the tiled floor as Dana pushed me toward courtroom 4C. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Outside, the sun was bright. Inside, it was shadows and whispers. Jason stood already at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit, 2 sizes too expensive for the truth. He didn't look at me when I entered. I didn't expect him to. It's hard to face someone when every lie you've told is about to be spoken out loud. Case 904-B, Helen Graves versus Jason Graves, the bailiff called. We rose. Dana stood beside me with a confidence that didn't need to be loud. She opened her folder slowly, carefully, like she was unwrapping something delicate or dangerous. Jason's attorney, Kramer, began with flair. "Your Honor, we're here today to expose undue influence and mental instability. My client believes Mrs. Graves was manipulated into reversing key financial decisions after the passing of her husband. She's since displayed signs of paranoia, delusion, and obsession." Dana said nothing. She waited, because she knew what was coming next. Jason took the stand first, hand raised, oath sworn like it meant something. His voice was calm, practiced. She wasn't herself. After Dad passed, she became obsessed with control. She didn't trust anyone. She'd write things down, then deny them. And then, suddenly, everything I was helping her manage, the house, the bonds, She shut it all down and accused me. You helped her? Dana asked, standing. Yes, he said. I managed her care, her finances, even drove her to appointments. Dana opened the folder. Then can you explain why you submitted this document? She handed the forged POA to the judge, signed under a witness who has since admitted she never saw Mrs. Graves, who received $200 in cash to rubber stamp something she never read. Jason twitched. His eyes darted. Dana flipped to the next page. And here, a gift letter that you signed, accepting a $400,000 property from Mrs. Graves, on which you then attempted to avoid gift tax penalties by transferring proceeds through your LLC. Jason's face drained. She played the audio next. From the teddy bear recorder. Jason's voice. She's basically brain dead. She won't know a thing. Silence. Dana looked at the judge. Not her words, his, verified voice print, time-stamped, recovered legally. Jason stammered. That was taken out of context. We'll let the jury decide that, the judge replied coolly. Then Dana did the unexpected. She stepped aside and placed her hand on mine. Would you like to address the court, Helen? I nodded once. She rolled me forward. My voice came out clean. My mind never faded, I said, staring directly at Jason. Only his conscience did. A murmur spread across the gallery. I buried my husband with dignity, and I spent every week after that watching his son turn inheritance into a chessboard. Jason tried to read me my own will while I was drugged, then tried to rewrite my life while I recovered. That's not concern. That's conquest. The judge didn't flinch, but his pen stopped moving. Jason stood again, desperate now. She's twisting everything. You're going to let her win this? Over me? Dana said nothing. She didn't need to. The judge leaned forward. I find in favor of the defendant, Mrs. Graves. The evidence is overwhelming. Furthermore, this court is referring Mr. Graves to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution under federal fraud statutes, including wire fraud, forgery, and elder exploitation. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. The gavel cracked once. We didn't look at each other as the deputies cuffed him in the hallway. I heard him yell once, something about rights and family. The words echoed in the corridor like distant thunder. I adjusted the lap blanket over my knees, calmly, because storms always sound louder when they're already too late, and Jason's forecast had just changed to permanent silence. The day the court clerk handed me back my estate file, stamped and certified, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt precise, like a woman who had finally taken back her name, line by line, in ink that couldn't be forged. Dana placed the binder on my lap and said, It's all yours now, official. Every signature, every clause, every zero. I opened to the first page and saw it there in bold, Graves Helen Marie, primary executor, sole beneficiary. Jason's name was nowhere, not as trustee, not as backup, not even as a footnote. He was legally erased from my legacy. I didn't smile. I signed. That afternoon, I met with Rhonda, my financial advisor, in a quiet office off Barton Springs Road. The windows overlooked the river, slow-moving and stubborn. I told her what I wanted, and she didn't flinch. The lake property, I said, goes to the Haven Project. She blinked once. The Women's Shelter Group? They specialize in helping women who were financially trapped. I'd like it to become a retreat house, a place where no one feels watched. Rhonda typed quickly, Done. And the car? Carl's vintage Cadillac, emerald green with a pearl interior he always insisted looked ridiculous and regal. The keys had sat in my drawer for months. My godson, I said, he's never asked for a thing, but he came every Sunday with lemon bars and books I'd already read. Nice boy, Rhonda said. The best kind, I nodded. We closed out the joint accounts next. Everything Carl had once shared with Jason, insurance, backup beneficiaries, dormant trusts, all dissolved, restructured, or retitled. Dana filed a restraining order the same day. Jason wouldn't be able to email me, call me, or send so much as a sympathy card without facing charges. It was over. And then the letter came. Thick envelope, prison postmark, a return address with numbers instead of street names. My nurse handed it to me like it might explode, on the front in Jason's cramped handwriting. To Helen, I need you to hear me. Please. I didn't open it at first. I left it on the kitchen table next to a blooming orchid Dana had given me last week. I drank tea. I watered the fern. I sat on the back porch and listened to the cicadas click their wings like summer wasn't over yet. Only when the light dipped into gold did I slice it open. The letter was 4 pages long. Neat. Pitiful. He started with grief. I lost Dad and didn't know what to do. Then guilt. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought you'd understand if you saw how much I needed to protect the family name. Then gaslight. Dana twisted everything. You weren't well. You did forget things. And finally, I know you're angry, but I still love you. You were the only mother I had left. I read it once. No more. Then I folded it slowly, deliberately, slid it into the fireplace, watched the edges curl into ash and collapse into silence. Not every apology deserves an answer. Some things you burn, and some people you leave exactly where they tried to bury you. I should have known the envelope from Jason's lawyer wasn't really from his lawyer. Not in the traditional sense. The address was typed, the paper was thin, and the salutation, Helen instead of Ms. Graves, was his tell. Inside was 4 pages of waxy self-pity written in Jason's unmistakable slant, half print, half cursive, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to confess or perform. He opened with regret. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I really am. I was drowning after Dad died. You were always strong. I thought you'd pull us through. Then came the deflection. The pressure got to me. The paperwork. The accounts. Everyone expected me to step up. I didn't know what I was doing. And I panicked. He buried the truth under a layer of emotional varnish. I made mistakes. But I was never trying to steal from you. I was trying to survive what losing him did to us. I read it once, calmly. Then a second time, slower. That's when I saw it. And I've already started unwinding the LLC that held the McCallum property, you know, the one you technically helped fund. I paused, reread the line, technically helped fund. I'd never touched that account, never approved a wire, never signed a loan agreement. Jason had used my forged POA to open the shell company in my name, then used that identity to buy, flip, and fake consolidate property assets. Now, buried in his letter, was an admission that still tied me, in writing, to his fraudulent business. I picked up the phone. Dana answered on the first ring. I need you at the house. Bring your tax consultant. Dana arrived with the IRS addendum paperwork already half filled. Her brow was tight, her voice low. This line could trigger a future audit, she said, tapping the margin of Jason's letter. It implies co-ownership. If the IRS flags his filings, they might come for you too. She passed me the pen. Sign here. This severs you completely, retroactively and irrevocably. I signed with the pen Carl left in his desk drawer. I never liked it much, heavy, brass, a little pompous, but it felt like a fitting tool to cut the last thread. Dana folded the letter and placed it in a clear evidence sleeve just in case. I made a copy for her, then took the original, stood up, and walked to the fireplace. Outside, dusk had started to melt into something golden. Inside, the match flared with that satisfying shh as the envelope caught. The flame licked the paper. Jason's words curled into smoke. I watched the sentence about the LLC disintegrate, the ink liquefying as it turned black and silent. I hope he reads my silence the same way he expected me to read his lies, I murmured. Dana didn't answer. She didn't have to. The flames answered for both of us. The next morning my landline rang, the one only 3 people used. I expected Dana, maybe my godson. Instead, "Hi, this is Marnie Schultz from the Austin Ledger. I wanted to ask if you'd be open to going on record." I blinked. On record for what? "The Jason Graves elder fraud case," she said. "Word is you rewrote the ending. and we think others might need to hear how. I looked at the matchbook still sitting on my mantel and smiled faintly. "Come by tomorrow," I said, "but you better bring a notepad." I wore navy silk and the earrings Carl gave me on our 10th anniversary. Small pearls, not flashy, just right. Marnie from the Austin Ledger arrived exactly at 10 a.m., notepad in one hand, voice recorder in the other, and eyes that scanned like a lawyer but blinked like a daughter. "You don't have to say anything you're not comfortable with," she said, as she sat on the edge of my floral couch. "I just want your words." I poured her coffee anyway, my house, my story. "You'll get them," I replied, "but they come with edges." She smiled. "I'd expect nothing less." We started slow, how Carl and I met, what we built, why I stayed sharp when he began to fade. Then the cracks, Jason's charm, his steady insertions into Carl's affairs, the soft coup of trust. Marnie took it all in, wordless, tapping her pen only when I paused. "Did you know right away?" she asked, voice gentle. "No," I said, "but grief doesn't just cloud the heart, it fogs the paperwork too." I told her about the morphine, about the forged will, about pretending to sleep while Jason read aloud the fantasy version of my final wishes. "And then," she whispered, "I gave the real one to my lawyer, while he was in the corner, snoring like a king." She blinked, stunned. Then we talked about the courtroom, the teddy bear recorder, the notary who flipped. The moment Jason's voice, smug and cruel, played across the speaker in front of a silent room full of suits. And then, I said the sentence I wanted, printed in bold, "My will was forged." I wasn't. Marnie stared at me a second too long. "You sure you want to go public? Full name, photo, history?" I nodded. "Because people don't just need to know it happened, they need to know it can." The article dropped 2 weeks later. Front page of the Sunday edition. Willpower. One woman's fight against estate fraud. Subhead. Helen Graves speaks out after surviving financial exploitation at the hands of her own stepson. It went viral before I'd even finished my toast. By Tuesday, elder law clinics in 5 states had reposted it. By Friday, the National Coalition for Senior Advocacy emailed to ask if I'd speak on their webinar. They asked for a title. I chose Ink and Intentions, Why Your Will Needs More Than Trust. After that, it all began to move. The hospital invited me to keynote a seminar on legal preparedness. The same building where Jason once stood over my bed, trying to steal my legacy, now hosted monthly workshops under my name, the Graves Initiative. Dana came to the first one. She leaned on the back wall while I talked. Didn't say much, just watched me own the space she helped me survive. Later, she brought up the idea over lavender tea. "You should write the book," she said. "We'll co-author, but it's your spine it's built on." Title? She wasn't finished. I laughed. "Neither is my story." She smiled. "Then let's make sure no one else's is either." That night, I opened the bottom drawer of Carl's old filing cabinet. It stuck a little, the way old truth does when you haven't touched it in a while. Inside was the original will, the one we drafted a decade ago, back when we thought the worst thing that could happen was losing each other. I read the first few lines, hand resting against the curve of my ribs. It named Jason as a secondary beneficiary. Not anymore. I took it to the fireplace, watched the paper turn amber, then black. It felt less like burning a document and more like breaking a chain. The flame took slow to the paper, curling the corners as if even fire had respect for what came before. But once it reached the signature line, Helen Marie Graves, 2013, it consumed without hesitation. We stood around the fireplace, each of us holding something. Dana, a glass of Bordeaux. My godson, Micah, a warm plate of my lemon shortbread. Nurse Yvette, a mug of peppermint tea, always cooling too fast in her hands. "This feels more like a funeral than the trial ever did," Dana murmured. "That's because this one ends what actually mattered," I said, watching the last ash flutter upward like a ghost unchained. The 10-year-old will had lived in my file cabinet longer than Carl had lived after writing it. We built it with love, good intentions, and a blind spot the size of Jason's smile, but intention doesn't protect, precision does. Micah handed out the champagne. It was cheap, sweet, and badly chilled, but I wouldn't have served anything else. No grandeur tonight, only clarity. We clinked glasses with mismatched enthusiasm. Yvette raised hers first. "To the end of old lies," she said, her eyes misted. "And to the woman who outlived every one of them." I offered the kind of smile that happens behind the ribs, not the lips. Then I reached for the box. Inside, 6 small envelopes, cream-colored, sealed with wax. I passed them out one by one. Micah hesitated. "What is this?" "For you," I said, "when I'm gone." He frowned. "Helen, I'm not going anywhere today," I interrupted, "but when I do, I want no courtrooms, no revisions, and no doubt. These are personal bequests, separate from the will, quiet things, honest ones." He nodded, palming his like a fragile photograph. Dana tapped hers thoughtfully. "You do know this isn't standard legal protocol, right?" "That's the point," I said. "Law makes it official. This makes it human." The fire hissed as another log settled. No one mentioned Jason, but I had. In the new will, his name appeared only once. Page 7, Jason Carl Graves, no relation. The phrase was legal, surgical, and devastating. Micah played a little jazz on the old Wurlitzer in the corner, while Dana told Yvette the story of how I trapped Jason with a gift letter and a forensic signature mismatch. "Like watching a silent movie," she said, "except the villain doesn't realize the credits are rolling." Laughter, soft and earned, filled the room. As the clock chimed 10, the last guests drifted out into the humid Texas night. I hugged each of them longer than I usually did, my hands holding just a beat past their first pull away. Upstairs, the hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender dryer sheets. I hadn't slept without a lamp on in months. Trauma's not afraid of the dark, it lives in it. But tonight was different. I stepped into my bedroom, turned the lamp off, and paused. Then reached for the switch on the wall and turned off the overhead light too. Total darkness. Quiet. Whole. The first letter arrived in a wrinkled envelope with no return address. The handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. "Dear Ms. Graves, I read about you in the Ledger. My nephew tried to do something similar to me. Not as clean, not as clever, but close enough. I thought I was alone until I saw your name. Thank you, I placed it beside the others." There were 6 by then. Some typed, some scrawled, all full of bruised dignity stitched back together by survival. One simply said, "You made me want to check my will." That saved me. There was no applause, no grand banners, just the rustle of paper and the hum of lives rerouted by one woman refusing to vanish. I called Dana. "Let's do it," I said. "The fund?" "Yes. Small, quiet, targeted, legal grants for victims of estate fraud, especially those too ashamed to say they've been tricked by family." She sighed in relief. "You know how many cases go unheard because people feel foolish?" "Too many," I said, and Jason counted on that. By the time our book hit pre-order charts, the title alone had already gone viral. She Wasn't Finished, Surviving Family Betrayal, rewriting the will. Dana's name was smaller than mine on the cover. She insisted. "You lived it," she said. "I just helped footnote the war." We did 3 interviews, public radio, 1 podcast, and a quiet chat with Texas Monthly. That was all I agreed to. The rest I left to the ripple. Hospitals reached out for bulk orders. Retirement attorneys asked to adapt it into their onboarding seminars. A university in Ohio wanted to build a curriculum around our case study, but the moment that anchored me wasn't public. It was a plaque, unveiled during the quarterly luncheon at the hospital, the very one where Jason once tried to erase me in morphine and forged pages. On the wall beside the ethics committee room hung a bronze square, "Truth Endures, in honor of Helen Graves." Beneath it, advocate, survivor, voice. I stood next to it longer than anyone else. I didn't cry. I just reached out and ran my fingers over the word truth until the bronze warmed beneath my touch. When Jason's sentencing came, I didn't attend in person. I didn't need to see his expression. I had memorized every manipulative flick of his mouth already. I watched it on mute from my living room, my feet in soft slippers, tea steeping beside me. The screen showed the courtroom like any other: beige walls, stack of binders, a judge whose eyes looked like they'd read too many bad excuses. Jason stood in the same cheap suit from his last hearing, the same one he'd smirked in when he thought the power of forged ink could outlast blood. The judge didn't hesitate. 6 years. No parole. Jason blinked once. I didn't. I turned the screen off before they let him out. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the garden lights blink on. The air smelled like honeysuckle and iron. Spring in Austin always carried both sweetness and weight. Micah joined me with a fresh lemonade. I saw the news, he said. Justice? No, I said, but a necessary edit. We clinked glasses. Inside, my phone buzzed. I let it hum once before I reached for it. The message preview read, "Helen, this is Abby from Quiet River Productions. We'd like to option your story for a limited series. Would you be open to a call?" I stared at the screen, then slowly grinned. Let them dramatize it, I thought. But I'll be the one to write the final script. I tapped reply. Call me tomorrow, but I keep the ending. The sun came in low and golden through the front windows of my study, the kind of light that makes dust look like confession. Dana sat across from me, a red leather folder between us, hands still, breath quiet. This is the final draft, she said, clean, enforceable, unbreakable. I took the pen slowly, but not because of age, because of weight. I had signed so many things in my life: loan forms, holiday cards, marriage licenses, hospital, Ezrinia, but nothing like this. This wasn't an ending, it was the final shape of me. I scanned every line, not because I didn't trust Dana, I trusted her more than most people trust blood, but because I'd learned, the hard way, that trust without verification is just nostalgia. Page 3. The Austin home, where I rebuilt my voice and burned the old will, was to be donated to the hospital that once held me captive in morphine and yet also gave me the first nurse who believed me. The Helen Graves Recovery Garden, they called it. I'd requested it quietly, no statues, no plaques, just a winding path, native blooms, and a bench. Page 4. Bench to be engraved. In loving memory of Carl Graves, love doesn't end, it evolves. Dana looked up. You're sure about the bench? I lived with him. I buried him. I rebuilt in spite of what he overlooked. I'm sure. She nodded, eyes soft but firm. Page 5. The Wurlitzer upright piano. The one I'd played for Carl when words failed, the one Jason had once tried to pawn behind my back, went to Micah, my godson. I wrote it in with my own hand under the bequest. To Micah, my true voice. Use it wisely, even in silence. Dana cleared her throat. You also left a note with the will? I handed her a sealed envelope. On the front, read this after everything else, and never earlier. Inside, a simple letter. Don't let anyone read you your own story. Not even if they say they love you, not even if they call it protection. You are the author. You are the ink. Don't forget it. I signed it with one word, not Helen. Survivor. I didn't die with drama. No hospital bed scene, no gasping confessions. I passed the way I wished Jason had left my legacy. Quietly, without disruption, surrounded by care instead of calculation. Micah was the one who found me, curled on the couch, jazz playing soft from the speakers, a teacup resting half full on the coffee table. My feet were tucked under the blanket I'd crocheted the year after Carl died. One hand rested on the piano keys. Dana told me later she cried when she read the note I left her, even though it only had 3 words, "You saw me." At the memorial, held not in a chapel but in the garden I donated, people didn't speak in eulogies. They told stories. Yvette talked about how I once convinced the hospital board to approve nurse-led estate planning workshops. Dana read a passage from She Wasn't Finished, her voice steady until the very end. Micah played my favorite piece on the piano. We had moved into the hospital atrium for the day. He cried halfway through it, but never stopped playing. On the bench beside the path, a young woman sat and watched it all. She clutched the book in her lap like it was a compass. A volunteer asked if she knew me. She nodded. Not personally, but she made me check my will.